I watched my stepsister Vivian glide onto the stage at New York Fashion Week, her lips painted in that perfect shade of crimson, my shade, the one I'd spent 3 years developing in secret, the shade I'd died protecting. The applause was deafening as she accepted the Innovator of the Year award, her company Vivian Cosmetics now valued at $500 million. She pressed her hand to her heart in false humility, those blood-red lips curving into a smile I knew too well. The same smile she'd worn when she pushed me down the stairs 6 months ago in my previous life. But this time, I wasn't dead. This time, I was very much alive, standing in the back of the auditorium with my own secret weapon. The complete knowledge of everything that would happen in the next 5 years and a formulation notebook she didn't know I'd hidden before my death. My name is Elena Chen, and I'm 23 years old for the second time. The first time I was 23, I was nothing. The family disappointment, the daughter my mother tolerated only because she'd married my father for his money, and I came as part of the package. When he died in a car crash when I was 12, leaving everything to my mother with me as a mere beneficiary at 25, I became even less than nothing. I became a burden. My mother, Catherine, remarried within a year. Gerald Whitmore brought with him his daughter Vivian, who was my age, and from the moment they moved into what had been my father's, sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, my life became a systematic erasure. Vivian got my bedroom, the one with the bay windows overlooking the garden. I was moved to the small room near the kitchen that had once been for staff. Vivian got enrolled in the elite private school I'd attended since kindergarten, while I was transferred to the public school across town because it would be good for me to be more humble. My college fund set up by my father mysteriously shrank as my mother borrowed from it for family emergencies that always seemed to involve Vivian's wardrobe or social events. I learned to make myself small, to stay quiet, to accept that I would always come second or third or not at all. The only thing I had that was truly mine was my love for chemistry and color. In high school, I became obsessed with cosmetics, not just wearing them, but understanding them. The science of pigments, the art of formulation, the way certain compounds could create colors that seemed to glow from within. I spent hours in my tiny room, mixing and testing, documenting everything in leather-bound notebooks I kept hidden under a loose floorboard. By the time I was 20, I had created something special, a lipstick formula that was different from anything on the market, long-lasting but not drying, with a color payoff that seemed to adjust slightly to each person's natural lip tone, making it universally flattering. And the shade, a deep crimson with undertones, that shifted between ruby and wine depending on the light. It was transcendent. I called it Phoenix Rising. I was naive enough to be proud of it, naive enough to mention it to Vivian during one of the rare dinners where we were all required to play happy family. A lipstick formula? She'd laughed, twirling her wine glass. Elena, that's actually kind of cool. Can I see it? I should have known better, but I was so starved for approval, for any acknowledgement that I had value, that I brought out my notebook. I showed her my formulas, my color theory, my plans to maybe someday start a small business. She'd smiled and nodded and asked such interested questions. She even offered to help, said her marketing degree could be useful, that we could be partners. I believed her. 2 weeks later, I came home to find my room ransacked. All 6 of my notebooks were gone. When I confronted Vivian, she looked at me with innocent eyes. Notebooks? I haven't seen any notebooks. Are you sure you didn't misplace them? My mother, of course, took her side. Elena, you're always so disorganized. They'll turn up. And honestly, stop bothering Vivian with your paranoid accusations. They never turned up, but 6 months later, Vivian Cosmetics launched with a signature lipstick line. The hero product was a deep crimson shade called Vivian's Victory that looked remarkably similar to Phoenix Rising. When I tried to speak up to tell anyone who would listen that she'd stolen my work, I was labeled jealous, bitter, delusional. My mother threatened to have me evaluated if I didn't stop spreading lies about her stepdaughter. I had no proof. The notebooks were gone. I had no money for a lawyer. I had nothing. So I did the only thing I could think of. I tried to recreate everything from memory. I worked 3 jobs to save money for supplies. I spent every spare moment in my tiny room trying to rebuild 3 years of work. That's what I was doing the night Vivian came to my room. You need to stop, she said, leaning against my doorframe. She was wearing a designer dress, her hair professionally styled. She looked like success incarnate. Mother's worried about you. All this obsessing. It's not healthy. You stole from me, I said quietly, not looking up from my workbench. You stole everything. I improved on a concept, she corrected. You had some interesting ideas, but let's be honest, Elena. You're not business-minded. You would have failed. At least this way, someone in the family is successful. It was mine. Nothing in this house is yours, she said, her voice suddenly cold. Not since your father died. Mother owns everything, and what Mother owns, I own. Including whatever sad little experiments you're conducting now. She walked to my workbench and picked up the test tube I'd been working with, a new formula I'd almost perfected. Before I could stop her, she poured it down the sink. Stop trying to recreate the past. Elena, you lost. Accept it. Something in me snapped. I lunged for the notebook on my desk, the one where I'd been recording my new work. If I could just save this one, She was faster. She grabbed it and held it over the flame of the Bunsen burner I'd been using. Let go or I burn it, she said. We struggled. The notebook fell. But it wasn't the notebook that caught fire. It was the bottle of alcohol-based solvent I used for cleaning. The flames spread across my desk with terrifying speed. I tried to grab my research. Vivian tried to leave. We collided at the doorway, and then I was falling backwards down the steep service stairs, my head connecting with the corner of the wall with a crack that seemed to echo through my entire being. I remember lying at the bottom of the stairs, unable to move. I remember Vivian standing at the top, illuminated by the growing fire, her face shocked, but not sorry. I remember my mother arriving, and instead of calling 911 immediately, I remember her and Vivian having a whispered conversation I couldn't quite hear. I remember thinking with perfect clarity, they're going to let me die. And they did. The fire department came, the ambulance came, but by then, the smoke inhalation and the head injury had done their work. My last thought in my first life was, if I could do it again, I would burn them the way they burned me. I woke up gasping for air in my childhood bedroom, the small one near the kitchen. My hands flew to my head, feeling for the injury, but found only smooth skin and hair. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand with shaking hands. The date read September 15th, 3 years earlier. 3 years before the fire, 3 years before my death. I was 20 years old again. I spent the first 3 days in a state of shocked paralysis, waiting to wake up from what had to be a dream or a hallucination as I died. But I didn't wake up. The days continued with perfect, mundane reality. I watched Vivian and my mother interact with me exactly as I remembered from this time period, the casual dismissals, the pointed comments, the systematic undermining of my confidence. But now I could see it clearly for what it was. Not my fault, not because I was inadequate, but because they needed me to be small so they could feel big. On the 4th day, I made my decision. I wasn't going to be small anymore. I went to my room and lifted the loose floorboard. There they were, all 6 of my original notebooks, pristine and untouched. I pulled them out and held them against my chest, feeling like I could breathe properly for the first time since waking up. I had my research. I had 3 years of foreknowledge. I knew exactly how Vivian would try to steal from me because she already had. I knew which of her business decisions would fail, which would succeed. I knew about the investors who would approach her, the scandals she'd narrowly avoid, the competitors who would emerge. I knew everything, and this time I was going to use it. The first thing I did was make copies of everything, not just photocopies. I uploaded every page of my notebooks to 3 separate cloud storage accounts. I sent encrypted copies to an email address I created specifically for this purpose. I buried a watermarked, dated copy of my most important formulas in the archived records of a chemistry forum I belonged to, embedding them in the metadata of seemingly unrelated posts. If Vivian tried to steal from me again, I would have proof. Documented, time-stamped, irrefutable proof. The second thing I did was accelerate my timeline. In my previous life, I'd been too careful, too slow, too afraid to put myself forward. Not this time. I knew Phoenix Rising was revolutionary because I'd watched it make hundreds of millions of dollars for Vivian. but I also knew from my death-granted perspective exactly what had made it successful and what Vivian had gotten wrong. She'd launched with only one shade, relying on the universal appeal angle. But I knew the secret wasn't just in the base formula, it was in creating a specific color range that worked with the formula's unique properties. I'd had ideas for 5 different shades before I died, variations I'd never gotten to test. Now I would perfect all of them. I quit 2 of my 3 jobs, keeping only the evening shift at a high-end restaurant where the tips were good and the schedule flexible. Every other moment went into my work. I used my grief money, a small life insurance policy my grandmother had left me that I'd barely touched the first time around, to buy better equipment, a proper heating element, a microscope, pure high-quality ingredients instead of the discount versions I'd used before. I worked with the focus of someone who had literally died for this. 3 months later, I had it. Not just Phoenix Rising, but 5 distinct shades. Phoenix Rising, the original crimson, Phoenix Dawn, a coral-tinted red, Phoenix Ember, a deep burgundy, Phoenix Flame, a true orange red, and Phoenix Gold, a brownish red with actual gold shimmer. But having the product wasn't enough. I needed capital to launch. I needed protection. And most of all, I needed to move before Vivian noticed what I was doing. That's when I remembered something from my previous life, a small detail I'd only learned about after my death, when I was a ghost haunting my own funeral reception, listening to family gossip. My father had a brother, an older brother who'd moved to Hong Kong decades ago after a family falling out, Uncle James. My mother had kept me isolated from him, never mentioning him, intercepting his birthday cards and Christmas presents. After my death, he'd shown up at the funeral, a distinguished man in his 60s, and had a shouting match with my mother about how she'd prevented him from having a relationship with his only niece. In the gossip I'd overheard, someone mentioned he was the CEO of Chen Holdings, a major investment firm in Asia, that he'd wanted to be part of my life, but my mother had refused all contact. I had an uncle, a wealthy, powerful uncle who'd loved me from a distance. It took me 2 weeks to track down his contact information, another week to craft the perfect email, professional but personal, explaining who I was and that I'd only recently learned of his existence. I attached photos of myself with my father from when I was a child, knowing he'd recognize his brother's face. He responded within 6 hours. Elena, I have been waiting 20 years for you to reach out. Your father was my best friend before he was my brother. Losing him was devastating. Losing access to you was worse. Call me at this number, anytime, day or night. Your uncle, James Chen, I called him immediately. We talked for 3 hours. I cried. He cried. He asked me about my life and really listened. When I told him about my cosmetics formulas, framing it as a business opportunity, not a family drama, he didn't dismiss me. Send me your business plan, he said. I want to see what you've created. I worked for 2 straight days on that business plan. I included everything: market analysis, manufacturing costs, pricing strategy, marketing plans. I included my formulas, protected behind multiple NDAs. I included my vision for building not just a product line, but a brand. I called it Phoenix Cosmetics. Uncle James called me back 3 days after receiving the plan. Elena, he said, this is exceptional work. The formulas alone are innovative, but your business model is sound, your market analysis is thorough, and your branding is compelling. I want to invest, and more than that, I want to mentor you. How much? I asked, hardly daring to breathe. For a 50% stake, I'll provide $2 million in seed funding, and I'll connect you with the best manufacturers, distributors, and marketing professionals in the industry. You'll maintain creative control. I'll handle the business infrastructure. $2 million. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having. Yes, I said to him. Yes, thank you. Elena, he interrupted gently. I'm not doing this just because you're my niece. Though that's certainly part of it. I'm doing this because your work is genuinely excellent. Your father would have been proud. I'm proud. Let's build something extraordinary together. I hung up and cried for 20 minutes. Then I got to work. The next 3 months were a whirlwind. Uncle James connected me with a cosmetic laboratory in New Jersey that could manufacture my formulas at scale. He hired a patent attorney who filed for intellectual property protection on my unique color-adjusting compound. He brought in a brand strategist who helped me refine the Phoenix Cosmetics identity, luxury accessible, scientifically backed, with an emphasis on the personal transformation narrative that echoed my own rebirth. I was careful to keep everything secret from my family. I still lived in the small room near the kitchen. I still pretended to be the same quiet, overlooked Elena. But now I was spending my days in planning meetings via video call, evenings reviewing production samples, and nights finalizing marketing materials. Vivian and my mother were too absorbed in their own lives to notice. Vivian had started dating a minor celebrity and was posting about it constantly on social media. My mother was busy redecorating the house, again, with money that should have been in my trust fund. It was almost funny how little they paid attention to me, even as I was building an empire under their noses. By December, 8 months after my rebirth, Phoenix Cosmetics was ready to launch. We'd manufactured the first production run, 50,000 units across all 5 shades. We'd set up an e-commerce site that was sleek and professional. We'd created social media accounts and partnered with a handful of carefully selected beauty influencers who'd agreed to review our products in exchange for free samples. Uncle James wanted to do a soft launch, release the products quietly, build word of mouth, and scale up gradually. But I had a better idea. I want to launch on January 15th, I told him during one of our weekly video calls. And I want to make a splash. Why January 15th specifically? He asked. Because that's exactly 2 weeks before Vivian plans to launch her cosmetics line, I said. There was a pause. Uncle James and I had talked about my family situation, though I hadn't told him the full truth about my death and rebirth. As far as he knew, Vivian was just a stepsister who'd expressed interest in cosmetics around the same time I had. Elena, he said carefully, I understand there's family tension, but business decisions shouldn't be made based on personal rivalry. It's not about rivalry, I said, which was true. It's about timing. Vivian has connections I don't have. She's popular on social media, she has wealthy friends, she's engaged to a celebrity. When she launches, she's going to dominate the conversation. If we launch first, we establish ourselves as the innovator. We set the standard that her product will be compared against, instead of the other way around. He considered this. And you're certain she's launching in early February? I was certain because I'd lived through it. I'm certain. Then we launched January 15th, he said. Let's make sure we do it right. Right turned out to be more spectacular than I'd imagined. Uncle James had connections I'd never dreamed of. He knew people who knew people who knew people. By the time January rolled around, we'd secured features in Vogue, Allure, and Elle. We'd partnered with 3 major beauty influencers who had a combined following of 15 million people. We'd arranged for Phoenix Cosmetics to be available not just online, but in a curated selection of Sephora stores as a trial run. The night before launch, I couldn't sleep. I kept refreshing our website, checking and rechecking that everything was perfect. The product photos, the descriptions, the checkout process. At 11:45 p.m., I sent Uncle James a text. Thank you for believing in me. He responded immediately. Thank you for being brilliant. Tomorrow, we change your life. At midnight, Phoenix Cosmetics went live. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The influencers posted their reviews at 6 a.m. as planned, and by 7 a.m., we were trending on Twitter. By 8 a.m., we'd sold 5,000 units. By noon, we'd sold out of Phoenix Rising entirely, and were running low on the other shades. The reviews were glowing. People weren't just praising the colors, they were talking about the formula, the way it felt on their lips, the way it seemed to become part of them rather than sitting on top of their skin. They were using words like revolutionary and game-changing. By the end of the first week, we'd sold all 50,000 units and had a back order list of 30,000 more. Uncle James immediately authorized a production run of 200,000 units. Beauty editors were calling it the launch of the year. A celebrity wore Phoenix Gold to the Critics' Choice Awards, and the next day, that shade had a waiting list of 50,000 people. And through it all, I'd been watching Vivian's social media accounts, waiting for her to notice. It took 4 days. She posted an Instagram story that I'd been tagged in by a mutual acquaintance. Wait, Elena Chen is your stepsister? The Phoenix Cosmetics Elena? Vivian's response was a laughing emoji and same name, a different person, I think. My stepsister isn't really the entrepreneurial type, lol. But then the questions kept coming. People dug up old photos of us together at family events. Someone found my social media profile, which I'd carefully updated to include professional photos and a link to Phoenix Cosmetics. The connection was undeniable. I watched in real time as Vivian's social media narrative shifted from confusion to excitement. OMG, yes, that's my stepsister. So proud of her. We used to experiment with makeup together when we were younger. I didn't respond publicly, but I did send her a private message. Hi, Vivian, let's have lunch. We met at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan, neutral ground. Vivian showed up dressed like she was going to a board meeting, which was ironic, considering she'd dropped out of her MBA program and was living off her father's money and my mother's access to my trust fund. Elena, she air-kissed both my cheeks. Look at you. You're glowing. Success looks good on you. Thank you, I said politely. You look well too. We ordered, small talk was exchanged, and then Vivian leaned forward with her most conspiratorial smile. So, she said, I have to ask. Your formulas, they're really sophisticated. Did you have help developing them, like a chemist consultant or something? There it was, the probe, the beginning of her trying to figure out how to replicate or steal what I'd done. I developed them myself, I said. I've been working on them for about 3 years now. Chemistry was always my passion. 3 years, she repeated. Wow, I had no idea you were so serious about this stuff. You never really talked about it at home. I talked about it once, I said, meeting her eyes. You told me it was a cute hobby. A flicker of something crossed her face. Memory, maybe, or calculation. Did I? I don't remember that. But you know me, I probably didn't understand how serious you were. Probably, I agreed. Actually, she said, her tone shifting to business casual. I've been working on something similar, a cosmetics line. I was planning to launch next month, but with your success, maybe we could collaborate, pool our resources. There's definitely room in the market for 2 Chen cosmetic lines. It could be a sister brand thing. I took a sip of my water. You mean a stepsister brand thing? Right, stepsister, she laughed. Even better. The story writes itself. 2 sisters, both launching beauty lines, supporting each other. We could do joint promotions, share suppliers, maybe even create a combined product line. I have some formulas that could complement yours. What formulas, Yo? I asked. She blinked. What? You said you have formulas. I'm curious. What's your signature product? What makes your line unique? Well, I'm still finalizing things, she said smoothly. But I have some really interesting color concepts. Deep reds, actually, rich crimsons. They're very on trend right now. Like Phoenix Rising? No, different. More sophisticated. I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Vivian, let me be very clear. I'm not interested in collaborating. I'm not interested in sharing suppliers or formulas or market space. Phoenix Cosmetics is mine. I built it alone and I'm going to continue building it alone. Her expression hardened. That's short-sighted. You're still new to this industry. You don't understand how cutthroat it is. Having family support could really help you. Family support, I repeated. Is that what you call it? What's that supposed to mean? I could have confronted her then. I could have told her I remembered everything, her stealing my notebooks, the fire, my death. But that would have revealed too much. Instead, I simply stood up. Good luck with your launch, I said. I hope it goes well. Vivian's cosmetics line, Vivian Luxe, launched on February 1st as originally planned. She'd clearly rushed to adjust her timeline, probably hoping to ride the wave of Phoenix Cosmetics' success. Her signature product was a lipstick called Vivian's Virtue, a deep crimson red. The reviews were mixed. Formula is sticky and uncomfortable, one beauty blogger wrote. Color payoff is good, but It's just another red lipstick in a saturated market. Obvious attempt to capitalize on the Phoenix Cosmetics trend, another influencer posted. But without the innovative formula that makes Phoenix special, it just falls flat. The comparison was inevitable and unfavorable. Where Phoenix Rising was praised for its unique color-adjusting properties and comfortable wear, Vivien's Virtue was criticized for being generic. Where Phoenix Cosmetics had a clear brand identity built around transformation and rebirth, Vivian Luxe seemed confused. Was it luxury? Was it accessible? Was it trendy or classic? She sold 3,000 units in the first week. We'd sold 50,000. I watched her social media presence shift from confident entrepreneur to defensive. She started posting about how real luxury takes time to be appreciated and how she was building a brand for sophisticated consumers, not trend chasers. It wasn't working. By March, Vivian Luxe had sold less than 10,000 units total, and Vivian had stopped posting about it entirely, pivoting back to lifestyle content and her celebrity boyfriend. Meanwhile, Phoenix Cosmetics was exploding. We'd expanded to 12 shades. We were now in 500 Sephora stores nationwide. We'd been featured on Good Morning America. Revenue for Q1 had exceeded $3 million. Uncle James flew in from Hong Kong to take me to dinner. "You've done something remarkable," he said, raising his glass of wine. "Your father would be incredibly proud. I'm incredibly proud." "I couldn't have done it without you," I said sincerely. "You would have found a way," he said, "Amboyes. You have his determination, his brilliance. But I'm glad I got to be part of this." He paused, studying me. "Elena, I have to ask. Your stepsister's launch, the timing, the product choice. That wasn't a coincidence, was it?" I considered my answer carefully. I knew she was interested in cosmetics. I knew she'd probably try to launch something similar. I wanted to establish Phoenix as the leader in this space before she had a chance to define the narrative. "That's strategic," he said. "Maybe even a little ruthless. Good. The beauty industry is ruthless. You need to be willing to protect what's yours." He set down his glass. "Which brings me to my next point. I want to increase my investment. I want to help you scale faster, get into international markets, maybe even acquire some complementary brands. I think Phoenix Cosmetics could be a billion-dollar company within 5 years." $1 billion. 5 years. "Yes," I said. Let's do it." April brought a surprise. My mother called me, actually picked up the phone and called me for the first time in months. "Elena, darling," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I've been seeing all this news about your little business. It's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," I said neutrally. "I was thinking, since you're doing so well, perhaps we could have a family dinner? Celebrate your success? It's been too long since we all sat down together." I knew what this was. Now that I had money and success, I was worth her attention. Now that I could be useful, I was welcome at the table. "I'm very busy right now," I said, "but I'll check my schedule." "Please do." And Elena, her voice took on a wheedling tone. "I wanted to talk to you about your trust fund. Since you're doing so well financially, you probably don't need it anymore. It would really help with some renovations I'm planning." "No," I said. "Excuse me?" "The trust fund my father set up for me is mine. You've already taken more than you were entitled to. The answer is no." "Elena Chen, I am your mother." "You're not my mother," I said quietly. "My mother died with my father. You're the woman who married him for his money and has been stealing from me ever since. And it stops now. I've hired a forensic accountant to audit the trust fund and a lawyer to pursue recovery of the money you've borrowed. You'll be hearing from them soon." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter than I had in years. In both lifetimes. The lawsuit came as a surprise to my mother and Gerald. The forensic audit revealed that over $200,000 had been improperly withdrawn from my trust fund over the years, money that was supposed to be untouchable until I turned 25. My lawyers argued that since my mother was the trustee, her withdrawals constituted breach of fiduciary duty and possibly fraud. The case didn't go to trial. My mother's lawyers took one look at the evidence and advised immediate settlement. In June, I received a check for $200,000 plus interest, and my mother was removed as trustee of my fund, replaced by Uncle James. The money was nice, but the real victory was the message. I wasn't helpless anymore. I couldn't be stolen from without consequence. Vivian, meanwhile, had quietly shut down Vivian Lux. Her website went dark in May, and her remaining inventory appeared on discount beauty sites for 70% off. Her celebrity boyfriend had broken up with her in a very public Instagram post about finding someone more genuine. She'd moved back into my mother's house after her apartment lease ended, and according to the housekeeper who'd always been kind to me and now texted me updates, she barely left her room. I felt no satisfaction in her failure. That surprised me. In my first life, I would have wanted her to suffer, but now I just felt tired. Vindication wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted her to be irrelevant to me. So I focused on Phoenix. By July, we'd expanded internationally, launching in the UK, France, and Japan. By August, we'd released our first eyeshadow palette, 12 shades inspired by the Phoenix mythology with the same color-adjusting technology applied to powder formulas. By September, we'd been approached by 3 major investment firms about acquisition offers. Uncle James and I discussed each offer carefully. The largest was for $500 million, which would make me phenomenally wealthy overnight. "What do you want to do?" he asked me. "This is your company, your choice." I thought about what I wanted. Not just money, I had enough of that now, not just success. I'd achieved that. What I wanted was to keep building, to see how far Phoenix could go, to wake up every day and work on something I'd created, something that was mine in a way nothing had ever been mine before. "I want to keep going," I said. "Let's build the billion-dollar company." "That's my girl," Uncle James said, smiling. October brought another surprise, an invitation to speak at the American Beauty Summit in Las Vegas. It was one of the most prestigious industry events of the year, and I'd been asked to give a keynote about innovation in cosmetics. I almost declined. Public speaking terrified me, but Uncle James convinced me. "You have a story to tell," he said, "not just about the products, but about building something from nothing, about believing in yourself when no one else did. People need to hear that." So I went to Las Vegas. I stood backstage at the summit wearing a custom suit in Phoenix crimson, my lips painted in Phoenix rising. My hands were shaking as I waited for my introduction. And then I heard, "Please welcome Elena Chen, founder and CEO of Phoenix Cosmetics." I walked onto that stage in front of 2,000 beauty industry professionals, and I told my story. Not the full story, not about the rebirth, not about my death, but I told them about being overlooked, about working 3 jobs to fund my research, about believing in a formula when no one else did, about the moment I decided to stop waiting for permission to be successful and just do it. The applause when I finished was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people wanted to talk to me. Investors, distributors, beauty editors, other entrepreneurs. I exchanged business cards, did impromptu interviews, posed for photos. And then I saw her, Vivian, standing at the back of the crowd watching me. She looked smaller somehow, older, tired. She was wearing designer clothes, but they hung on her differently than they used to. Less like armor, more like a costume she wasn't quite selling. When the crowd finally thinned, she approached. "That was a good speech," she said. No preamble, no false enthusiasm. "Thank you." She started, then stopped. Tried again. "I didn't realize how good you actually were at all of this." She gestured vaguely. I don't know what I thought. That it was luck, maybe, or that you had help, but it's you, isn't it? It's always been you. I didn't answer. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what it's worth. I know you probably don't believe me, but I am. I saw an opportunity and I took it without thinking about what it would cost you. That was wrong." "Yes," I said, "it was." "Are we?" She hesitated. "Can we ever?" "No." I said, not unkindly, we can't. Not because I hate you, but because I don't trust you. And I don't need you. Maybe someday that will change, but not now. She nodded slowly. I understand. She turned to leave, then looked back. For what it's worth, I really am proud of you. What you built, you deserved better from all of us. Yes, I said. I did. By the end of the year, Phoenix Cosmetics had revenue of 50 million and was valued at 200 million Oz. We'd released 3 new product lines, eyeshadows, blushes, and a skincare line that used similar color-adapting technology. We employed 150 people. We were stocked in 2,000 stores across 12 countries. I was 21 years old and a multi-millionaire. More importantly, I was happy. Uncle James threw me a birthday party in December. A proper party, not the obligatory family dinners I'd endured in my previous life. He flew in from Hong Kong. My small but growing team from Phoenix came. Some of the beauty influencers I'd worked with came. Even the housekeeper from my mother's estate came, the one who'd always slipped me extra food when I was younger. No one from my immediate family was invited. I didn't even tell them about it. At midnight, Uncle James raised his glass for a toast. To Elena, he said, who took ashes and built a phoenix? Who turned loss into legacy? Who proved that the best revenge is extraordinary success? I'm honored to be your uncle and your partner. Here's to the next chapter. To the next chapter, everyone echoed. I smiled and drank and felt for the first time in 2 lifetimes like I was exactly where I belonged. But this isn't a story about revenge, not really. It's a story about rebirth, about getting a second chance and using it not just to settle scores, but to become the person you were always meant to be. So, let me tell you about the next chapter. In January, 1 year after Phoenix Cosmetics launched, we opened our first standalone store in Soho. 3 stories of glass and light with the Phoenix logo emblazoned above the door in rose gold. Inside, customers could test every product, consult with professional makeup artists, and even watch demonstrations of how the color-adapting technology worked. The opening was a massive event. Lines wrapped around the block. We had a ribbon-cutting ceremony with the mayor. Beauty editors from every major publication showed up. And in the middle of it all, Uncle James pulled me aside. There's someone I want you to meet, he said. He introduced me to a woman in her 70s, elegant and sharp-eyed. Elena, this is Margaret Whitfield. She founded Whitfield Beauty in the 1970s. You probably know the brand. I did. Whitfield Beauty was legendary. A female-founded company that had dominated the industry for decades before being acquired by a conglomerate in the early 2000s. I've been watching your trajectory, Margaret said. It reminds me of my own early days. Brilliant product, clear vision, and the stubbornness to see it through despite everyone telling you it couldn't be done. That means a lot coming from you, I said, sincerely. I'm going to be very direct, she said. I want to mentor you. I see the potential for Phoenix to become what Whitfield was, an iconic generational brand, but to do that, you'll need to make smart decisions about scaling, about maintaining quality as you grow, about protecting your brand identity. I can help with that. Why? I asked. Why me? She smiled. Because when I was your age, someone helped me. And because women building empires should help each other rise. So what do you say? I said yes. The next 3 years were a masterclass in building something lasting. With Margaret's mentorship and Uncle James's business acumen, Phoenix Cosmetics grew strategically. We didn't just chase growth, we built infrastructure. We hired the best people. We invested in R&D. We acquired a small but innovative skincare brand and integrated their technology with ours. By the time I was 24, matching my age when I died in my first life, Phoenix Cosmetics was valued at $800 million. We employed 600 people. We were in 45 countries. We'd won every major beauty industry award. And I was offered something I'd never imagined: the opportunity to take Phoenix public. The IPO roadshow was intense. Weeks of presentations to investors explaining our growth strategy, our market position, our vision for the future. But the day Phoenix Cosmetics started trading on the NASDAQ, watching that opening bell ring, seeing our stock price climb throughout the day, it was surreal. We closed the first day up 45% with a market capitalization of $1.2 billion. I was 24 years old and a billionaire. Success changes how people treat you. Suddenly, my mother wanted to have regular dinners. Gerald wanted to discuss investment opportunities. Vivian sent a long email about how she'd always believed in me and hoped we could rebuild our relationship. I responded to none of them. Instead, I used my new wealth to do something I'd always wanted. I bought my childhood home. The estate in Greenwich where I'd grown up, where my father had lived, where I'd been pushed into the margins. I bought it from my mother for $15 million, which was $3 million more than market value. My lawyer delivered the purchase offer with a single condition. She had 60 days to vacate. She called me immediately. "Elena, you can't be serious. This is my home." "It was my father's home," I said. "He left it in trust for me. You've been living in it as a courtesy." "That courtesy has expired." "We're family." "No," I said, we're not. We never were. You married my father for his money. You systematically stole from me, and you raised your daughter to do the same. You let me suffer because you benefited from my suffering. That's not family, that's exploitation." "I won't sell," she said. "Then I'll purchase the note on the mortgage, which I happen to know is in default," I said, and I'll foreclose. This way is better for you. You get money to start over, but either way, I'm getting my father's house back." She sold. I gutted the house and rebuilt it. Not just renovated, completely reimagined. I tore down walls, reconfigured rooms, brought in light. The small room near the kitchen where I'd spent years of my life was converted into a proper office. My original bedroom, the one with bay windows overlooking the garden, became a guest room for Uncle James when he visited. The house stopped being a monument to my suffering and became a home. I filled it with art and books and comfortable furniture. I installed a professional-grade cosmetics lab in the basement, where I could still experiment and create. I planted a garden in memory of my father, his favorite flowers, his favorite trees. And on the day I officially moved in, I stood in the foyer where my father used to spin me around when I was little, and I cried. Not sad tears, grateful tears, relieved tears. I was home, really home, in a way I'd never been home before. But the most satisfying moment came 2 years later, when I was 26. Phoenix Cosmetics had continued to grow. We'd expanded into fragrance and hair care. We'd opened stores in every major city. Our market cap had reached $5 billion, making Phoenix one of the most valuable independent beauty companies in the world. And then I got the invitation. New York Fashion Week wanted Phoenix to be the exclusive beauty sponsor. They wanted our products used in every show. They wanted our artists backstage. They wanted me to attend as a VIP. The showcase event was a gala at Lincoln Center, all the biggest names in fashion, beauty, and entertainment. I wore a custom gown in shades of crimson and gold like a literal phoenix. My lips were painted in Phoenix Rising, of course. And as I walked into that gala, I saw her. Vivian, working as an assistant to one of the designers. She was checking in guests, managing clipboards, doing the invisible work that keeps events running. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the woman who'd tried to steal my future and the woman who'd built one anyway. She nodded. A small, respectful acknowledgement. I nodded back. And then I walked past her, into the gala, into the life I'd created. The speeches at the gala were full of praise for Phoenix, for innovation in beauty, for female entrepreneurship. When I was called to the stage to accept an award for Industry Innovator of the Year, the same award Vivian had won in my first life with my stolen work, I felt a strange sense of symmetry. 5 years ago, I said into the microphone, looking out at the room full of fashion and beauty elite, I was nobody. I was working 3 days, mixing chemicals in my bedroom, dreaming of creating something that mattered. People told me I wasn't cut out for this industry, that I should give up, that success wasn't for people like me. I paused, making eye contact with faces in the crowd. But I didn't give up, not because I'm special or talented, though I'd like to think I'm both, but because I believed in what I was creating, because I refused to let other people's limitations become my limitations, because I decided that the only permission I needed to succeed was my own. The applause started, but I held up a hand. Phoenix Cosmetics isn't just a beauty brand. It's a statement. It's about transformation, about rising from ashes, about becoming the most brilliant, powerful version of yourself, no matter what you've survived to get there. Every product we make, every shade we create, every formula we perfect, it's all in service of that idea. That you are not defined by what was done to you. You are defined by what you do next. The applause this time was deafening. After the ceremony, dozens of people wanted to talk to me, to pitch me ideas, to network. I spent 2 hours in that room, playing the role of successful CEO, gracious winner, industry leader. And then I slipped out onto a balcony for air. Margaret Whitfield found me there. Hell of a speech, she said, standing next to me and looking out over the lights of Manhattan. Thanks. You know what the best part of success is? She asked. What? It's not the money. It's not even the power, though that's nice. It's the freedom. The freedom to be generous because you're not fighting to survive anymore. The freedom to be kind because you're not threatened by other people's success. The freedom to be yourself because you don't need anyone's approval. I thought about that. About how I'd spent both lifetimes fighting. First to survive, then to succeed. About how I'd been so focused on beating Vivian, on proving myself, on getting revenge. What if I'm not sure who myself is? I asked. Then you get to figure it out, Margaret said simply, Ate. That's the gift of surviving. You get to become whoever you choose to be next. So who did I choose to be? I chose to be generous. I established a scholarship fund for young women studying chemistry and entrepreneurship, $10 million to start, with plans to grow it. I mentored 3 young founders, investing in their companies and introducing them to my network. I donated to causes my father had cared about: cancer research, education access, environmental conservation. I chose to be creative. I went back to experimenting in my home lab, not because Phoenix needed new products, but because I loved the science of color and formula. I published a paper on color-adapting cosmetic technology in a scientific journal. I taught a guest lecture series at my father's alma mater. I chose to be happy. I dated people who respected me. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. I threw parties in my renovated home, filled with people I actually liked. I spent time with Uncle James, learning about his life in Hong Kong, meeting his family, integrating myself into the Chen family legacy I'd been denied in my first life. And I chose to be at peace with my past. Both pasts. On the anniversary of my death, or what would have been my death in the original timeline, I drove to the cemetery where I'd been buried in my first life. My grave didn't exist in this timeline, of course, but I stood where it would have been and said a quiet goodbye to the girl who'd died on those stairs. Thank you, I whispered, for being strong enough to want more, for being angry enough to fight back, for believing we deserved better. We did it. We built the Phoenix. The final piece of closure came on a random Tuesday in March. I was in my office at Phoenix headquarters, a gorgeous space in a Manhattan high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and art on every wall, when my assistant buzzed me. "There's a Catherine Whitmore here to see you," she said. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." My mother, using her married name like we weren't related. "Send her in," I said. She looked older than I expected. We'd had no contact in over 3 years, and those years had not been kind to her. Her clothes were still expensive, but dated. Her hair was still professionally colored, but the cut was off. She looked like someone trying to maintain an image she could no longer afford. "Elena," she said, "thank you for seeing me." "What do you want?" She flinched at my directness. "I want to talk, to apologize, she took a breath, to ask for help." "Help with what?" "Gerald left me," she said. 6 months ago. He took most of the settlement money from the house sale. I have enough to live on, but not the lifestyle I'm accustomed to. And Vivian, she's struggling too. She's working retail, barely making rent. I thought maybe I'd give you money," I finished. "Maybe you'd be willing to help family," she corrected. "I know I wasn't the best mother to you. I know I made mistakes, but we're still family, Elena. That has to count for something." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd made my first life hell, who'd stolen from me, dismissed me, allowed her daughter to destroy me. This woman who'd only noticed I existed once I had something she wanted. In my first life, I would have given her the money because I was desperate for her love, desperate to be seen as worthy. In this life, I knew better. No, I said. Elena, please. You were never a mother to me, I said. You were my father's widow who resented having to tolerate his daughter. You stole from me, you prioritized Vivian at every turn, and you taught her that I was something to be used. When I needed family, you weren't there. Now that you need help, I'm not obligated to be here for you. I'm sorry, she said, and she might have even meant it. I really am. I know I can't undo the past, but no, I said firmly. What? You can't. And I'm not interested in funding your future. You had access to my father's money, my trust fund, and the proceeds from his house. What you did with those resources is not my problem. So that's it? She asked, her voice hardening. You're just gonna let your own mother struggle? You let your own daughter struggle for years, I pointed out. Why should I treat you differently than you treated me? She stood up, angry now. You were always ungrateful, even as a child. Your father spoiled you, and you never appreciated what you had. Now you have all this money and success, and you won't help the people who raised you? Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of my office. Get out of my building. You are not welcome here. If you contact me again, I'll have my lawyers file a restraining order. We're done. She stared at me, shocked, like she'd never considered that I might actually refuse her. That I might have grown strong enough to say no. Security escorted her out. I sat alone in my office afterward, hands shaking slightly, not from fear or regret, from relief. I'd done it. I'd set the boundary I'd never been able to set before. I'd chosen myself. Phoenix Cosmetics continued to grow. We celebrated our 5th anniversary with a collection inspired by the 5 elements. We reached $10 billion in market cap. Forbes put me on their cover with the headline, "The Phoenix, How Elena Chen Built a Beauty Empire from Ashes." But the success wasn't what mattered most anymore. What mattered was the team I'd built. People who believed in the mission of transformation and empowerment. What mattered was the scholarship fund that had already helped 200 young women pursue their dreams. What mattered was the note I got from a customer who said Phoenix Rising had given her the confidence to leave an abusive relationship. What mattered was the life I'd built that was mine, truly mine, in a way nothing had ever been in my first lifetime. On my 28th birthday, 2 years older than I'd lived in my first life, Uncle James flew in from Hong Kong for dinner. How does it feel? He asked. Being 28 and running a company worth more than most people dream of? Honestly, I said, it feels like I'm finally living the life I was supposed to have all along. Like I'm finally the person I was always meant to be. Your father would be so proud, he said. I wish he could see what you've become. Maybe he can, I said. Wherever he is. Maybe he knows. We toasted to that. Sometimes I wonder about Vivian. If she ever thinks about what happened. If she regrets her choices. If she's happy now in whatever life she's built for herself. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. Because this story isn't really about her or my mother or revenge. It's about a girl who was given a second chance and used it to become extraordinary. It's about learning that the best response to being underestimated is to become undeniable. It's about building something so beautiful, so successful, so authentic, that it eclipses every hurt that came before. They say living well is the best. Revenge. But I've learned it's not revenge at all. It's rebirth. And I rose from the ashes more brilliant than they ever imagined possible, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I refused to let them define me. Not because I needed their approval, but because I found my own worth. Phoenix Rising wasn't just a lipstick shade. It was a promise I made to myself that I would never be small again, that I would never let anyone steal my light, that I would burn bright enough to illuminate my own path. And I did. I built an empire. I claimed my legacy. I became the Phoenix.